Team Corney and Barrow in Bordeaux, finally, for the first time in 3 years, with Peter Sisseck, and it's brilliant to have just tasted Rocheyron 2021. And we're just going to have a quick conversation with Peter on a few questions about the vintage. Peter, thank you for having us.
Wonderful seeing you again.
Yeah. So first of all, I wanted to ask you about the growing season. Were there any challenges or specific factors about the growing season?
In our case, it was down to mildew in the Bordeaux in July, due to a lot of rain that made it almost impossible for us to get into the vineyards and spray. And we have survived very well the 16, 18 mildew disaster that a lot of people suffered a lot from. But this year we did take a hit, so we're quite low on the Bordeaux quantity. But still, we managed to get on the property 15 hectoliters, so it's not 8 or 9 like some of other people who have suffered similar.
But still, tiny yields.
Tiny yields,
but the blend again is slightly different in terms of the proportion of Cabernet.
Because it was the Merlot that suffered the most. So of course, relatively the proportion of Cabernet Franc is higher, and this year we've been able to what we think is going to be the final blend is around 40% Cabernet Franc.
Yeah. Climate change. Obviously, the last 3 vintages, 18, 19, 20, in inverted commas, have been climate change vintages because they've been warm summers and they've been early harvests.
Yeah.
21 is very different. It's sort of not a climate change vintage on the surface, but actually it's here to stay. And what does climate change mean for Bordeaux and for wine growers generally?
Again, I mean, the climate is changing, which is already a change. I'd like to call it a warming, or we're in a period of warming right now that may be caused a lot by instead of pointing fingers. It's different. The ripening is very different from the 60s, from the 70s and the 80s, for sure. I think for the next couple of years we might have to adapt to this warming. I think a lot of the Merlot that is planted in Bordeaux was a consequence of the poor ripening conditions in the 60s and the 70s. I can see when you drive around the Bordeaux landscape right now, there's a lot of vineyards being pulled out and replanted. So I think there will be a push for later ripening varieties. I think the Merlot in certain areas could be a bit on the over-ripening side. On this particular terroir that we have here, which is clay over limestone, are cooler soils. So actually this warming for us has been beneficial. It's not that we're going to change hugely what we're doing. The most important part of any vine growing anywhere in the world is how water is getting supplied to the plant. And because we have such a wonderful soil with the limestone underneath that is very good at absorbing and liberating water, we don't see water stress in this vineyard. So we can continue on these soils. We rarely see overripe Barrow, which is also good. So I don't know exactly where the balance is 100% for this property. And of course it will change according to the year. And one of the great possibilities that we do have in Bordeaux is that we can play with the varieties. I mean, in Burgundy, where you only can play with one variety, if you make red wine. You're a bit more, so that's why the soils are very specific, and you know what you get from a very specific thing. Here on the 7.4 hectares that we have here, it's wonderful to be able to do this. And one of the reasons I think it's so hugely important that a property like this, we do have a second wine where we sort of can reallocate some of the, to get the balance really the most proper for what we consider is best for the vintage.
A question on pricing of the wines. I mean, this is a question that we're going to ask lots of people in Bordeaux. So I mean, it's a live topic always. And I mean, what is the most important factor when you're deciding how to price wines? And is it the intrinsic quality of the vintage? Is it the amount of wine that you've produced?
Yeah.
Is it the reputation of the vintage, or literally how much you've made in a specific year?
Yeah.
What?
I do think this is a personal belief in them, you know, as I'm also making wine in other areas of the world, who do not have this ever-changing question of pricing going up and down, where you can have a much more natural evolution of pricing. I've never really understood the Bordeaux way of doing it, and we have also adapted. And the reason why we work with you, first of all, was because Adam accepted us to work with you, but also the fact that, you know, that was the way I wanted to distribute my wine. I have huge respect for the négoce in Bordeaux, but we had such great success with working with individual agents and clients all over the world. But it's certainly not to take away from the fact that Bordeaux, of course, has enormous success in getting wine distributed all over the world. But it's also true that this evolving discussion of how do you see the price level, how do you this, and how do you I mean, ideally, it should be that the great vintages, they should be a bit more expensive. This is also what you see in the secondary market, that the highest priced wines are often the best vintages. But I think we can all mention several vintages that were very great vintages that were never sold very expensive. And you can mention quite a few vintages that were not great vintages that were sold extremely expensive. So it seems to be a bit of a problem. If you see it from a clear point of view from cost, I mean, we have 15 hectoliters this year, so if we should make the same as we did last year, where we had 25 or 28 hectoliters, we automatically have to put up the price for this year. It's also the rising costs of cork, bottles, wood that we cannot get wood for our wooden cases because it's all produced in Russia. And what's more difficult to discuss that with a négoce, which is just a huge amount of people who all want to hold to a certain wine.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a great answer, and I think we're in a pretty strong agreement with what you say. So, finally, I know you do make wine, obviously, in other regions outside Bordeaux. Is there anywhere else in the world that one day maybe you would make wine?
Don't we all want to make wine in Burgundy?
Yes. Yeah. I'd love to see that. Any village in particular?
No, I mean right now. I mean it's an impossible dream right now. But I would love to. Yeah. And I'm trying to find out ways how it could become possible. Yeah. I would love to one day make a great wine from Burgundy.
Okay. Well, you heard it here first.